Hey guys, welcome to another video. Today's video is going to be about replacing a ball joint, and I think we're going to wind up doing front brakes on the car. But I got an estimate here. My wife was back in Saraville and I was up here, and she had an emergency where her windshield wiper fell off and she had to go get windshield wipers done and an oil change, and it wound up costing her like $170, which is kind of crazy for an oil change and a set of wipers. And then of course they did a safety check on her car and they found a couple things which we're going to repair today. Let me just show you the pricing of this ball joint, and they didn't even give an estimate on the brakes. So they quoted her for the part $115.98, and for labor $179. All right, so I went to the store and I bought the part for 56 bucks. So we're going to wind up putting the ball joint on it for $56. And it's not that hard. Probably should take me a couple hours, if that. All right, I'll see you at the car. So I got the car jacked up, got both wheels off the ground. Now it's about, I have to take the wheels off and put one of my Harbor Freight recalled jack stands under it until I get replacements for them. I got to bring them back to the store and get them replaced. So these lug nuts here, they're 22 millimeter, which is a little odd because most cars, the sizes for the lug nuts are either 19 or 21. So this is a little off. All right, I'll see you when I get the tire off. All right, so one of the first steps, if you see all this rust, I don't want to get all this rust into my threads. I'm going to wind up hitting it with what's called BP Blaster, penetrating lube. That lube's going to wind up getting into the metal, give us some lubrication, because when I'm taking this out, it creates so much heat, it can almost like weld itself to that stud, and then it's going to snap, or I'm going to wind up stripping something. So to avoid having more problems, I'm going to wind up lubing my threads on my bolts. Alright, so that socket I don't actually have here. I have it back in Saraville. I'm going to wind up going to AutoZone and buying it. But in the meantime, I'm going to wind up taking our brakes apart, create more access to get at the lower ball joint. So, and also, I'm inspecting them, and they're very low. You'll see in a minute when I get the pads out. But first thing I got to do is get those two hold-down bolts off. So, see if they're a 14 or not. Yep, 14 millimeter. Take my 3/8 ratchet. Break them loose, give them a couple palm strikes. We'll take them off real quick. Alright, so our caliper's off. Now we're going to inspect our guide pins. They move a little stiff. We'll wind up lubing up. That's nice. This one's a little stiff. And like I said in the last video, if you wind up having stiff pins, you wind up wearing the outside pad really bad, and I mean the inside pad gets worn out really bad, but the outside one stays thick. But yeah, these pads are in bad shape. So here's our backing plate, and they're almost down the metal. They're actually worse than the Ranger we did the other day. Wiggle this one out. Yeah, so we got this one out. Actually, the wear indicator got so worn it must have been screeching, and the wife must not have told me, and it actually snapped off. It's supposed to be a wear indicator on this one. So it comes down and touches the rotor, makes a squealing noise, and it's gone. So that's shot. Alright, so the next thing I'm going to wind up taking off is this bracket. So once I have that set up, I'll turn you back on. Alright, so we're going to break these loose. These are always really tight, so you need like a breaker bar or a 1/2-inch drive ratchet with a pipe on it. When I wind up putting these back on, I'm going to make sure that I wind up torquing them to 100 foot-pounds and putting some Loctite on them. We don't want them walking out. Alright. Alright, so I got them loose. I'll take them off the rest of the way, not on camera. Alright, so I'm about ready to remove this bracket, unscrew them. and I wound up taking it off the rest of the way. I take my bolts, they got all this powdery junk on it. That's probably leftover Loctite or something on them. Yeah, it's got to be leftover Loctite, so when I put them back together, I'll make sure I put Loctite on them. And then we have our rotor has to come off. Now this is different than the Camaro and the Ford Ranger. This is what's called a floating type rotor. Sometimes they're stuck on there with rust. This one's nice and loose, and they just slide off the studs. And that will wind up giving us a little bit more access to that ball joint down there. Just a little more access to this ball joint right here to get this off. So just trying to make some room. Okay, now for one of the hard parts, getting this cotter pin out. So what I like to try to do is kind of get it straight, wiggle it a bunch, see if I can get it to start to wiggle from that end right there. It's just a bad angle. Sometimes I can get a pick in it and start picking at it. I got it moving a little with that one. I'll get a bigger one in it now. Maybe I can get the wire cutter on it now. Nope. Alright, so I got it really exposed now. I'll put one of these bigger ones in there now. And get it out. Now I'm going to wind up putting a new one in it. So now I have to get a wrench on it and take that castle nut off. I'll put a wrench on and take that castle nut off. So let's see what size it is. Got two different wrenches here. I got a 17 and an 18. And it looks like it's going to be an 18. Well, kind of did it off camera, but I had to beat on this thing badly to get it to separate. Maybe my pickle fork was too narrow. This is kind of like for the tie rod ends, but I do know how I now have that separated, and now I gotta pry it out. So on my lower control arm, I'm gonna try to get a spot where I can get this that I could pry down on my control arm. I gotta pry until I get it out. Alright, so I got it out. So I might wind up being able to do this job without taking the axle out, because now I got access to these, and now I also see why this was hard to separate, was my fork was hitting that rivet. But now I got to get my cutoff tool and cut off those rivets. Alright, so now I'm going to start grinding those studs. So I need my safety glasses, and I have an electric cutoff wheel, so it's got a blade on it, and I'm going to wind up cutting like X's into these studs, and then I'm going to hit them with a chisel and a hammer, and it should knock the heads right off of them. While I'm waiting for the compressor to build up pressure, basically what happened with this, the ball joint boot split, wound up getting water in there and rusting the hell out of it. I should not be able to spin this like this easy. It should have a lot of pressure on it, but yeah, it was pretty worn out, pretty bad shape. So that's the reason why we're going to replace it. See, my compressor's kicked off. Let's see if we got enough pressure now to air chisel it off. Oh, maybe my gun's broken. Okay, so I took my air hammer apart and got it working again. Might have to cut that one again. Alright, so I got the top of that rivet off. Now I'm going to use a punch punch it through. See if this works. Got a center punch. Might not have enough pressure on this, huh? Wow, that sucks. So now I cut a groove in the ball joint, hoping that would relieve some of the tension on it. Nope, that's not working either. So now I got all the rivet tops off. My new plan of attack. So I'm going to beat the crap out of this with a hammer until I can start loosening up those rivets. And I don't know if I even want to show you. It's going to be crazy loud. And beating the crap out of it with a hammer has gotten it loose. Now I'm going to try to punch these down or cut them flush with the cutoff wheel. Let's see if the center punch will knock it the rest of the way through. Can't believe it. It doesn't want to punch. So now I drilled a hole through it. Hopefully now with the punch and chisel she comes loose. I can't believe how much work it took to get that out. That was ridiculous. I'm about ready to like kick Chevy's butt. And they do this to a lot of their vehicles. I've had this with Suburbans back in the day, in the 90s, early 2000s. They seem to rivet ball joints on, and they're a pain in the butt. Well, that's number 2. It's a lot harder job than I thought. Definitely for somebody with a lot of experience. Alright, all 3 of them are out. Sheesh! That was tough. Alright, so the next problem we encounter is this nut doesn't fit in the hole. So I'm going to have to drill these holes out a little larger. The other thing I want to show you is the nut they use. It's called a pinch nut. It kind of locks itself in place, so no need for a lock washer. So when you first put it on, it goes on nice and smooth, and then it gets tight, and it's kind of tough to put on. So you're going to have a socket and a wrench to hold one side while you turn the other. Alright, so I'm going to wind up drilling these holes out. So I got the right drill bit. Put it on my drill. And I'll wind up drilling my hole out. So here's our old ball joint, all loose, causing tire wear, danger that our spindle could pop loose. And then we have our new one, new grease boot on it. I can't even spin it, it's nice and tight in there. I'm going to have to wind up putting a grease fitting in it. So every time this car gets an oil change now, it's got to have its joints greased. Now back in the day, in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, almost all your joints, tie rods, ball joints, they came with grease fittings. It was part of your oil change. And then they decided sometime, I guess in the 90s or something like that, that they were going to make non-greasable joints, and it's been a problem ever since. Okay, so now I'm going to use a impact gun and try to get these 18mm bolts tight. So I'm going to take a wrench, hold that nut from moving on the bottom. And get them as tight as I can get them. I might have to go this way with this one. Size. I lost the nut. I didn't lose it, just never put it on right. Tighter. All right, so I got those all tight. Now I gotta use my pry bar and get the ball joint once again back in its place. Okay, now I have to pry the spindle back onto the ball joint. Alright, so it looks like it's going back in the hole. Sorry guys. Now I have to get that castle nut on there. Alright, so I got started. Now I just have to tighten it up, which I might have to turn the steering wheel back to do. Alright, so I got to do my final tightening. So when I tighten this, I got to make sure that I get it tight, and also that the hole in the ball joint is lined up for the new cotter pin. So let me get the new cotter pin out. Try to find where my hole is in it. Goes right there. And then once I have it in, I have to bend it over. But when I bend it, I also don't want to make sure that it's not going to hit anything that is spinning. So in that position, looks like it's in good shape. That's not going to wind up hitting my axle. By the way, that's what this is your axle that spins your tire. We have our brake hose. We have our McPherson strut. We have an outer tie rod end. This is a jam nut for our toe alignment. And this is our inner tie rod end that we turn to adjust our toe. This bottom piece here is called our lower control arm. Sway bar link, very common problem to go bad, and a sway bar. All right, so these are our suspension parts. Once again, it's a sway bar link, steering parts, inner tie rod end, which is connected to what's called a rack and pinion, locking jam nut for our alignment, and outer tie rod end. Tie rod end also goes bad a lot. Lower ball joint, which you've been seeing us work on. That's part of our axle, which is called our outer CV joint. This is our CV boot. Inner CV joint and boot. And then it goes, finishes our axle all the way and goes into our transmission. This is called our hub. Inside here's our hub bearing, dust shield, and then all our brake parts, which I'm going to be putting on next. So the job isn't done. I still have to wind up putting the brakes back together because they were worn out. So my next step that I'm going to be doing is putting the piston back in. So this is a single piston caliper. I have my specialty tool once again. I'm going to take an old brake pad, put it right there, and yeah, maybe this one won't actually even work on it. Let me try it. Let me put it on this position, maybe it'll work. Alright, and I will squeeze. It's going in pretty tight. It's a tough one. Feel it going now a little bit. Yep, she's moving now. Sometimes if you got the hose pinched, she doesn't want to move. Right, just going in nice and slow. Gotta have some good grip strength for this. You guys see it or not? Piston's going in. Alright, almost in. Alright, the piston's in. Next thing I'm going to do is take my bracket. Pop my clips off. I haven't even checked that my new brake pads come with new clips, but what I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to take these out. My slide pins. I think I brought my grease out here. Yeah, they're a little dirty. Alright, so I got my grease here for my pins. Get a little bit of grease on there so they slide nice. Try to load some up, get it inside the boot. Slide my pin in. Oh yeah, that works so much better. Do this one. All right, that's in there nice now. All right, next step is putting the rotor back on, but before I do that, I should wash my hands. I'm really dirty and I don't want to get grease all over my brakes. All right, something I almost forgot to put in. I forgot to put the Zerk fitting in it. It threads in. It's got a little tiny check valve in it, like a ball bearing with a spring. So I'm going to wind up putting that in now. All right, now this tool, grease gun. All right, now it's time to put the brakes back together. So I'll put my rotor back on. And I got my bracket with my greased up pins. And my bracket bolts. catch it. 18mm screw. 18mm screw, and I'm going to pull it until it clicks. Then I'll go to the next one. Alright, so now I gotta put my shims back on. Alright, that's one. Now I gotta find the other one I pulled off because my brakes didn't come with new shims. So now I gotta put my shims back into place. Now my brake pads. If you remember, I was talking to you about how one of them comes with a warning indicator that was snapped off our pad. So now we got a chance to look at these two pads, how thick that one is compared to that one. I mean, there is almost nothing. You see some hairline cracks in it. So was definitely in need of it. Warning indicator's broken off. So the warning indicator one goes on the inside. And then we have our outside pad. And then we got our caliper goes into place. Might have to be squeezed again. I did the other side brakes, which were it was a rough brake job too. The pins were stuck, so I had to take the bracket off and repair the pins. So my tool for that is probably over there. So when I pushed that other piston in on the other side, it pushed this one out a little bit. Alright, so I got that in. Make sure when I put it on there's no loops in my hose. Now I got my bolt. Get that one started. I'll go down here, push that pin in. And I get that one started. Go get my 14mm. Tighten it up. Need a wrench to hold this piece from turning. I might need a vice grip to do that. This wrench ain't thin enough. So now I got a vice grip on it to keep that pin from turning, so I can get this thing the right tightness, or torque I should say, tightness. What kind of word is that? Sounds special. Alright. Okay, that's tight. Get this top one now. I gotta keep that one from moving. Alright, got that one tight. Alright guys, let me go over some of these parts again. So, this little skinny wire, that's for ABS sensor, anti-lock brake system. It's a speed signal that goes to the computer. We have our hydraulic brake hose. We have our caliper bracket, slide pins, rotor, axle nut, the whole axle, CV joint, CV boot, well, outer CV joint, outer CV boot. Very common part to go bad on Hondas. Like those kids that have stick cars, they like to rev them up, pop the clutch, and they wind up breaking the CV joint. It's called a spindle, this piece. And the job that we replaced down here, lower ball joint. Man, this one made me curse a lot today. Outer tie rod end, jam nut for the alignment, inner tie rod end, and this is our adjustment for our toe. Sway bar link, sway bar, lower control arm. Down here, this is a very common part that bends when you hit curbs. McPherson strut, and this is the spring that holds up the weight. Alright, so that's a lot of parts to go over again. One more time. Hydraulic hose, caliper bracket, slide pins, rotor, axle nut, axle, outer CV joint, inner CV joint, spindle, outer tie rod end, alignment jam nut, inner tie rod end, lower control arm, sway bar link, sway bar. Alright guys, this job was tough for me today. One of the reasons why is I had attitude. It's a day off. This is Memorial Day weekend, and my wife was freaking out because she was told she needed a ball joint. She did, but I just wanted to make her happy. But on a scale of like 1 to 10 doing this job in your driveway, I've done some crazy stuff in front of my house. I mean, I pulled frames out of cars and stuff like this. So I'd say like pulling the frame out of my Camaro when I did that, like total complete, taking the car apart, that would be like my scale of 10. Easy job, easiest thing in the world, probably would be fixing a flat. All right, so that's like the scale from fixing a flat to basically taking a whole car apart. Doing this ball joint in my driveway, I'm probably going to say like a 7.6. There was a lot of specialty tools needed. I mean, I needed a big pry bar, I needed pick set, I needed an impact gun, which I have on the other side of the car. I needed a drill. I needed an assortment of hammers, I needed an impact gun, I needed a grease gun, I needed a caliper tool, I needed a cutter with a cutting edge on it, I needed pickle fork for separating the ball joint. Need a lot of specialty tools to do this job for. So your normal home guy, not doing this job. But someone that's like an automotive enthusiast, he could do this job, but yeah, he's gonna learn some new curse words. There was times that I had to take a break, had to eat a sandwich, had to curse, had to get into a fight with the wife a little bit. You know, it's one of those things. It's frustrating work. That's why usually mechanics have a really filthy mouth, and I'm proud of myself. I don't think I cursed on screen today, but yeah, it was a tough one. Obviously, I got a back brace on, hurt my back. But now I get this car put together, and maybe she'll make me a nice dinner, and I can do something tomorrow. Maybe I'll go fishing on my boat tomorrow. But guys, I hope you're enjoying yourself this weekend, eating some good food and everything like that. And I hope you all get A's on this test here. And I'll talk to you next video.